All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Art of Social Resiliency Engagement with Michael Steen, the Director of Education for the Watermen's Museum in Yorktown, Virginia. My name is Carmera Thomas, and I am with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and with her Chesapeake, and a planner for the Chesapeake Watershed Forum. A few housekeeping rules before we get started. This session will be recorded and posted to SCED within the next few days. If you haven't already, update your name. All attendees will be muted unless you are speaking. So please use the chat box feature for any questions and I will monitor the chat. If you have any technical issues throughout this session, please message me and I will do my best to help you out. And lastly, you can find the next session will be office hours on SCED. And now I will turn it over to Michael.
Hi, everybody. Welcome from Yorktown, Virginia. Wish we could all meet together in person, but since we must stay COVIDized, we're going to go through a real quick presentation today. I'm going to move the slide on. There you go. A lot of information we all talk about all the time. The question is, we need to start thinking about what we're doing and how we can move forward. Things are changing all around us already. The fish migrations have changed, the water temperatures are rising, all the things are starting to shift, but we have a trouble getting attention of the general masses. Okay, and I talk about all the time with my school students and my adult learning classes. Why should we care about saving the Chesapeake Bay? And we're the choir, so we know all about why we need to and how we need to. The question is, how do you get the general masses attention? How do you get that the working class folks and the folks who are struggling day to day to care about what's going on? Discussion is all the time. We talk about why don't people care about what's happening in their backyard? My terminology is a little bit strange, but you say we live in a Maslowian type world, right? We all have our basic needs that we must meet. The person who's worrying about buying gas for his car to get to work so he can buy food for tomorrow tends to think about personal needs and family needs first. They really don't think about what's happening 20 years down the road. Okay, so how do we get their attention and start them thinking about how the importance of enviro-social resiliency? Big words. Okay, so next slide. Come back. There you go. So what are we talking about with enviro-social resiliency? That's a good picture there. It just shows the great race picture there with humans racing against the animals and the life in the sea. Yeah, we're moving forward. Things are already changing all around us. The animals notice that and they're responding. We humans are not responding quite so well. So what are we talking about with enviro-social resiliency? Okay, next slide. There you go. So resilience, environmental resilience, the ability of natural systems to recover from disturbances and tolerate, adapt, or change. Again, we all know animals and all things in the environment have a choice. When their habitat change, they can move, adapt, or die. So how do we adapt to that change? Or how do we move forward? So enviro resiliency, how do the animals do it? Or how do we help them do it? Social resilience, individuals, groups, and families, communities trying to move forward. When things become unstable, they can also move, adapt, or die. So we need to find some way to get people thinking about environmental resiliency and social resiliency, how we can adapt to change and overcome what's already around us. Okay, so next, there we go. And engagement. Yeah, how do we get people's attention? Programming, hands right now with the COVID running around, much less hands-on programming like I would love to do down here. That's what the Watermen's Museum is well known for. But still, even planning forward, we have to be able to create those programs. They have to be experiential, whether it's, we can't do it on hands, we've got to find some other way to do it. We need sensory programming because we have to get people thinking about their natural environment so we can actually work with them and start talking about those bigger questions. You know, climate change and cultural resiliency, big questions for all, importance for all of us that general public does not really want to talk about much. Okay, so next. There we go. So what we're going to do for this session, we're going to explore the theory of social relativity and use of art, poetry, and music to engage groups, promote concepts toward stewardship of not only our backyard, but our whole shared world. Okay, so we're going to be, so in order to move forward in that, educating the public, that is what we do. We are professional educators and interpreters and people working with parks and nonprofits. It is our job to teach. That is our end goal. But how do people actually learn? Now, this would be a lot of information that everybody already knows. So it's review, but it's always good to review. And from my point, it's all relative, my dear Dr. Watson. Next. Okay, so I'll put this forward. The theory of relativity is the concept and the base for education. So we all know the theory of relativity. E equals mc squared. That's energy equals mass times twice the speed of light. Okay, I propose that for education, education equals mind times r squared. That's relative and retention. That's what we're pushing for, that retention aspect in education. So next. So what is relative? Things from our own personal life experiences or our shared life experiences. And tongue in cheek, aunts, uncles, sisters. Yes, that's relative because people know about their families. The natural environment, bugs and frogs, catching fish, things we all share together. Thanksgiving, bathrooms, the flooded basement from the last sea level incident. Okay, so these are all things we share. In order to get people talking and thinking, we have to relate to things they can experience. It's hard to talk about history or science, the big word science, unless people can relate it to their own lives. So that becomes our point. But to develop programming that can open up that conversation into what our shared life experiences are. So relativity. Next. Okay, so retention. That's the end goal of education, is how to retain the knowledge. So how do people learn? What is the best way to teach? Okay, so we have a very simple pattern for that. The next slide shows the simplest of the thought process. On we go to the next. There you go. We've all seen the Cohen learning pyramid, right? And we all know that people learn in different ways, and the pyramid is a very useful tool, but not always 100%. But it's a good place to begin. Okay, we use passive vehicles to provide information to our audience. That's what we do. Lecturing, reading, audiovisual. Those are things we all have in our museums and our parks. Those are the standards. The question being, how do we get people to the higher level of actually retaining information? So the idea that someone who attends a lecture and does nothing like today, oh no, not today, we'll do something today to bring this up some, but you retain only about 5% of what you hear. Some people retain a lot from lectures, but in general, it's pretty low on the end. Reading something or looking at something audiovisually or watching a demonstration, those are ways we can pick up information, but they're always going to be limited in their retention level unless you move to the active level. Okay, so that's what we're trying to move to, from away from traditional passive down to that active. Okay, so next. So retention. It refers to the mind holding on to the image or being able to recall it for use. Okay, so that means you have to get it stuck in our heads. A lot of us adults, well, our heads get a little concrete sometimes. We don't pick up information quite so fast. That's why we always try to work with younger students and get them to think and move forward. But even for us older folks, yeah, we still can pick up information. We just have to actually use it better. So in order to retain information, the mind has to be actively engaged. That's where that active presentation comes in. It's not just watching a demonstration, it's watching a demonstration and then doing it. Okay, it's not just listening to a lecture, it's listening to a lecture with inquiry, perhaps. So your brain actually works. Okay, so in order to get the brain engaged, you must do something with it. The mind must work. If the hands are working, that means your mind's working. So where possible, we always go to hands-on programming. And so do it again. Repetition does practice does make perfect, as they say. So the more you do something, the more you retain it. That next level beyond just thinking about it and doing it with your hands is to repeat that action. So if you can, in this case here, working with our special needs friends, building boats, repeating that motion of measuring helps you retain how to measure things and how to visualize things. Okay, so what if you can't do hands-on activities though? That's the question. In this COVID times, we can't get that close to anybody anymore. We can't do massive hands-on sharing of things. So what's the next step? Next. There it goes. So active inquiry. That means actually talking to people. We call it the inquiry method. That means speaking and answering questions to engage the mind. You ask people how things work and have them think about it. You ask them to analyze something and think about it. Because if the brain is active and moving, then something's going to start getting in there and starting to get to that retention level. Best way to do that is sensory inquiry. But how do you get people to use their senses to inquire? Again, classic interpretive programming. We ask them to smell things. We ask them to touch things and use their senses to engage their mind. Because face it, most of our deepest memories are sensory memories. We remember smells from childhood. We remember food our grandmothers prepared. We remember Christmas when we were 6 because of sensory images that are set in our mind. And once they are there, then you have them for comparative retention. That means we can pull those memories up and compare them to other things we're doing now. So, next slide. So climate change. We find the big problem with climate change, it involves the big ugly word of science. Yeah, so anytime the science pops up, most of the audience kind of tunes out. So how do we get them to engage in science? If I start talking about the atmosphere and the percentage of molecules and what the molecules do when they combine, I can get very deep into science. I do all the time. I teach environmental science here at the museum. But in order to get people to actually listen to the science or start moving forward and talking about the changes and what we can expect in climate change and what we can expect in sea level rise, we have to get them past that science block. I have the same with history. If I say I'm doing a history program, half the audience automatically tunes me out because they've bad experiences with history. or bad experience with science in school. So we have to find ways to break that barrier down. That means we've got to plan our programs to get to the highest level of retention, get to the highest level of education. And so how do we get them past the scary science in order to engage them? Okay, next. Relative inquiry. That's what I mentioned before. We have to find ways to get to that relative information that's in their head so they can relate what we're talking about in history or science to actually things that they are have in memory or sensory memory or in daily life effects. When you get someone's attention, the kid's attention, let's talk about food. Even better, let's talk about bathrooms historically. That gets people's attention real quick. So I call it historytainment. And that means we have to get their attention and get them tapping their foot and get them interested, get them laughing in order to open up and start working on other things. So what activities do we have in common relative to our daily lives? Art and drawing, stories and poems, music and songs. Here at the museum, we have a house band that's called Shantygrass, and we mix in all kinds of music to talk and teach history. And we change the words to a lot of the old familiar songs to sea level rise songs and environmental action songs, so that we can start getting that familiar tune in their head and start thinking about, having people think about the environment and what's going on. So we need to find these are examples I use all the time. When kids come and attend a environmental session here, not only do we go out and look for crabs off the pier or take the seine net and catch fish, we always come back and we always make big, massive murals. And the kids get to draw everything we've talked about or anything they've seen. That way, we reinforce what we've been talking about by using art and drawing techniques. Every chance we get, we read the Lorax to all the kids. Now, it's amazing. All the children coming to my daily activities and attending my camps in the summertime, very few of them have actually even been exposed to the Lorax. My high school at-risk kids, I have 2 classes of 20. Out of those 2 classes of 20, only 2 of the kids had even heard of the Lorax, and one of them has seen it on television. The rest had never read it or has never been read to them. So even the high school kids and the adult class we work with, we always come back to those relative stories and make people think. Okay, so relative inquiry. Ask questions, try to find that information, and then move forward from there. Okay, so next. So here we go. So we're going to do some breakout sessions. And so we have, I guess, 6 different groups what they're working on. We're going to do 3 activities in those breakout stations. The first one is active music. One group's going to work on the Banana Boat song, and we're going to rewrite the words to the Banana Boat song. Now, it's a great tune. It's easy rhyming. It's very, very social in its wording. But the idea is to make the words relevant either to sea level rise or climate change or even simpler stuff. What you have for breakfast. So that's one group. The active music group will be one of the breakout sessions. Second breakout session is the next page. There we go. Active poetry. Ooh. Now this is the tougher one for the breakout sessions. With our school programs, I use Dr. Seuss, and we rechange the words to the Lorax. But this is a very, very deep poem. It's one of my favorites from way back in college. Dylan Thomas. So change the words to this to associate a different activity. Sea level rise or climate change, or I have several people who've done political statements in this as well. and talk about the riots. So I spread this poem around to about 300 educators that I work with, and I've gotten about 30 of them back, well written. So this is the second breakout group working on the Dylan Thomas poem. Okay, so the third one is active art. Dun, dun, dun. This is the MAD activity. All living things have three options when their habitat changes. They can move, adapt, or die. So we asked the kids in my programs, and the adults too, what species will be lost when the habitats change? And can they move? Where can they move to? How can they adapt? If they can't move or adapt, then extinction is the next final phase. So what happens when habitats changed? And better yet, what species will move into our neighborhoods when we're 20 degrees warmer? When Tidewater, Virginia becomes the subtropic Florida type climate. Not only plants will move and die, animals will have to move and die. Okay, so can we adapt? That's the question. So using pictures and drawing or just words, active art will be the third station. Okay, now I have included a couple of examples from my other contacts and classes. So here's one for Dylan Thomas. There's also an example for the Sea Will Rise song. So I guess we're ready for the breakout sessions. That'll be next.
Yep, so Liz has posted in the chat the link for the doc and instructions for breakout groups 1 and 2 working on the song, 3 and 4 working on the poem, and 5 and 6 working on active art. Please click on the link before you exit the main room, just in case that gets lost in the chat. And I can see a few people already clicked on it, so thank you.
There you go. Now, if we were all together, we would break up into small groups and spend a little bit of time and actively go through the stuff. And then we would all stand up and make presentations. Harder to do on Zoom. So write all your thoughts down in those the Google Box chat, and then we will come back to it and we'll talk about your ideas.
Great.
And
all right, we should.
So there goes. So some active inquiry, some active thinking skills, and writing, of course. Once you write something down, the active writing also puts it into your head as well. And we're trying to think of ways to change words or shift things around. That's active thinking. Ooh, all that active stuff. Okay, so let's work on that for a little bit. We'll all come back together and see what we can come up with. Yeah, so folks are having great discussions on poetry and songs. But that's the idea. We take familiar things and we make people think about the familiar thing. And by taking something familiar and changing the words to change the meaning, that means we can we're getting our minds engaged. So the poem's the hard part, right? I did one for DEQ. Do not go gentle into that good night. Stand up, burn and rave before the close of day. Rage against the killing of the light. Right? And you politicians there on your sad height have cursed us and ignored our fierce tears. I pray we do not go gentle into your endless night, but rise up and rage against the killing of the light. So protest poem about closing down DEQ. This poem's really deep. There are other simpler poems like Dr. Seuss that people can, more jumping easy. Well, I use limericks a lot, especially around March and St. Patty's Day. But we make limericks about nature. You get really, really deep. You can go into haiku. I did that my teaching a class at VCU up there in Richmond. All the students had to write a haiku about nature. That's a little tougher. That's metered. Huh? But and songs like the Sea Will Rise song, Waters Rise When I Can't Go Home. The group is working on a song about heat and temperature. The temperature's rising. That's something we need people to think about. Okay, so the best way to think about the effects of the increased temperature is to actually go through and get creative in the brain. What is that temperature causing to happen at home? What's it causing to happen to animals and plants around us? What's going to happen when it gets hotter than it already is? Summers are now recorded the hottest in local history, and we're just moving forward and getting hotter as we go. So again, using relative examples and moving toward the inquiry brain working techniques. Okay, that's how we can start getting people to thinking and responding to us. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so how do we get them to think about enviro-social resiliency? To think and talk about it. How to get them to care and become stewards of their backyard and the world around them. Okay, that's the question. So when I do my programming here, my example that I use all the time, we start with art, we start with poetry, start with music, and that opens that discussion up. Okay. And then we can move forward. There you go. So by using open the mind with relative inquiry, we can have people starting to share their own experiences and their concerns. A lot of folks I deal with in my open house events here for climate change, they are coming to be because they're interested in the topic, but we have to find a way to get them to open up and tell us their experiences. And if they can start discussing their concerns, then we can start moving forward and start talking about how to build resiliency. Environmental resiliency. Wow, the animals can move, adapt, or die. How do we help those adaptations? How do we help keep them from going to extinction? So many species have already become extinct worldwide, and we're losing more daily. So that's the question we need to ask. What are we going to do to ensure environmental resiliency? Social resiliency. Okay, we have to find ways to discuss social activities. How's this going to affect the communities so close to the water's edge? Here down around Yorktown, we've got a lot of communities that live in those threatened areas. And often those folks are the working class communities. They don't have the option of moving to higher ground. They don't have the money to work on adapting their houses by raising them up. Okay, those are things that are beyond the daily cost of a lot of people. A lot of communities only have one or two ways in and out of their community, and those roads flood every time it rains. So we need to start people thinking about how we can work together to move forward, how we can plan to become resilient. So we have to open those minds up. So if we can do with inquiry and art and things that are they're relative to their daily experiences, in this case, the road leading into their community, then we can start talking about ways to work together to move forward. Okay, so next. There you go. So enviro-social stewardship. That's the end goal to take away. Taking responsibility for preserving our shared world. It's up to us to help the communities, help the individuals start thinking about how they can become the steward of their own backyard, how they need to work together, not only with each other, but with the scientists, with the educators, to start planning things now. I tell the kids in my climate change classes that I teach, in 20 years, when the big effects are going to be hitting us, it's not us adults who are going to be in charge. It's going to be the kids who are in charge. So we need to get them thinking about what they're going to do and get them active in projects to improve their backyard, to improve their schoolyard, to think about the animals that live in their backyard. Okay. It's all things we need to do. And programming is how we start developing that. We move forward. So we develop our programs, we think them through plan A, plan B, plan C, with the idea that we can help other people move forward too. So there it is. Education and the art of social resiliency engagement. So we need to engage people and get out there and do the best we can. Okay, so there it is. The next slide, was that the last slide? There you go. And the big end tag is, our actions will create the legacy for future generations. And we always go back to a quote from one of our local Virginia Indian chiefs. You take from the river, you must give something back. So those of us who live by the water and will have to survive by the water need to start thinking about how we can help not only ourselves, but our communities and the environment. Okay, so excellent. So a real fast run through. There we go, on educational theory and interpretive theory, but things we all need to think about doing and moving forward with. Okay, so there it is.
If you have any questions, please put them in the chat.
I'm trying to think of an easy way to do it, because yeah, see, these were all old shots, so all I've got scanned versions, and if you expand those, they're going to be grainier than prep. They're 8x10s.
There it goes.
Below that.
Thank you all for joining us. Remember to post your pictures on social media with hashtag Chess Forum and hashtag Chess Collective. Check out Chesapeake Collective on the SCED tab. And then please don't forget, if you haven't already, to fill out the demographic survey. I will put the link to that in the chat. Please don't forget to do that before our last day here. And if you have signed up for office hours at 2:30, that is what's next. And then don't forget to leave feedback on this session on the SCED schedule under the session. Thank you so much for joining this. And if you have any questions, we are here for a few more minutes, so we can take questions for Michael.
And they can always contact me directly. I'm always glad to chat and talk with professionals.
Great.
Okay, so thank you all much, and I hope to see you in person sometime in the future. You get a chance to come on down to Yorktown and stop by. We are here all the time, literally all the time. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.